Hello, friends. It's a great delight to come your way again. After such a long time, I'm going to do a series that is coming right from Colossians chapter 3. The title is Seeking the Things That Are Above. In Colossians chapter 3, verse 1, we read that if you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. And so this series is going to dwell on that command, seek the things that are above. And so the first session I have titled it The Perfect Setup. The idea is that God has set the Christian up perfectly to seek Him, or to seek the things that are above. When we were in university, when we got to first year, many of my friends, many of the people that I went to university with, they had never tasted alcohol. But there's this strategy that some of the companies use. For example, the Brewers of Alcohol. And so during celebrations or social events at school, they will bring a lot of alcohol. So anybody who wants to consume a bottle of alcohol, it will be free. These companies were trying to cause the students, my friends who had never drank, to develop the taste for alcohol. And they were setting them up to be lifelong consumers of alcohol. So while these companies set up boys, students, to become lifelong consumers of alcohol, God sets up the Christian to be a seeker of the things that are above. But how does God do this? Right there in Colossians chapter 3, verse 1, there is a conditional clause that is there. It says, if you have been raised with Christ. And so this command follows a condition. So it is not open to everybody. It is directed at a specific group of people who have been raised with Christ. So what is this about the resurrection or being raised with Christ that puts a person in the position to be a seeker of the things that are above? There are 4 things that I have found. 1, the Christian has been raised by God. The Christian has been raised by God. When you think of the wonder of salvation, the wonder of the virgin birth, the wonder of the crucifixion, the wonder of the resurrection, no human being could have thought of this. It says the lamb that was slain from the foundation of this world. And only God could have thought about this. In John 3:16, we learn that for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. It is God who gave His Son. And so salvation is God's idea. It is God's doing. It is for God's glory. In Hebrews chapter 2, verse 10, he says, through this, that Christ, the founder of our salvation, the captain of our salvation, will bring many sons into salvation. And so we see Christ bringing many sons, and it is for the glory of God. So when we think of salvation, it is God's idea. It is God's doing, and it is for the glory of God. The second thing about about being raised with Christ is that He has raised the Christian from death. There is a description of the sinner, of the person who is spiritually dead in Ephesians chapter 2. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 1 to 4, there are certain descriptions about the sinner. The person, it says, the sinner is a son of disobedience. He has been set for the wrath of God, to face the wrath of God. And so the sinner is under some 3 oppressive influences. When you read Ephesians chapter 2, verse 1 to verse 4, he's under the influence of the devil. He's under the influence of the world. And he's under the influence of the sinful nature. You can combine this and call it spiritual death. What spiritual death does to a person is that it causes a person to be uninterested in God. In Romans chapter 3, verse 10, coming down, one of the things that the descriptions that the Bible gives to the sinner is that he lacks the capacity to seek God. And so God raises human beings. God raises sinners from this condition so that they will become responsive to him. There are examples of people who were spiritually dead. When Jesus Christ met Nicodemus, when Nicodemus went to him in John chapter 3, Nicodemus could not understand what it meant to be born again. He didn't. And when Jesus Christ met the woman at the well, when Jesus Christ was talking about living water, the woman did not understand what he was talking about. And the third thing is that the Christian has been raised to life. And so, right after, when you look at the description of the sinner, it means he lacks the capacity to understand God. He lacks the capacity to be responsive to God. It means he is unresponsive to God. His senses are dead. The spiritual senses are dead. But in this resurrection, he says, raised with Christ. It means the Christian has been raised to life. And so that condition of spiritual death, when God pronounced on Adam, the day that you will eat this fruit, you will die. God took the Christian out of this condition, and that the spiritual senses of the Christian were awakened to the existence of God, to the voice of God. And so the Christian now has the ability to understand God, because the spiritual senses have been awakened. So he's awakened to the glory of God. He's awakened to understand God. And the fourth thing about being raised with Christ is that the Christian has been raised with Christ. That is very important. And so there is a connection, there is an unbreakable bond between the Christian and Christ. And Paul captures it. He says, nothing shall separate me from the love of God. What had Paul seen? His spiritual senses were awakened. He said, not poverty, nothing, absolutely nothing can separate me from the love of God, because he was awakened to the reality of the eternal things, of the things that are above. So the Christian is joined to Christ at the resurrection to become co-heirs with him. And when you talk about the resurrection, it is a revelation of God's power and God's glory. Paul saw this. And so because the resurrection was followed by the ascension, and so immediately you think of the resurrection, you also think of the ascension. Jesus Christ ascended into glory. And this brings hope to the Christian. This is an assurance of eternal life. And so, when you read John chapter 14, verse 6, everything that Jesus Christ was telling us, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The resurrection confirms it. He is the life. And so, through these four things, raised by God, raised from death, raised to life, raised with Christ, God sets up the Christian to seek the things that are above. And so when God raises the Christian with Christ, he has set him up to seek the things that are above. No wonder the hymn writer captures it. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. Heir of salvation, purchased of God, born of the Spirit, washed in his blood. And Peter writes, though we do not see him, we love him. The spiritual senses of the Christian have been awakened. And though we do not see Christ physically with us, we love him. But it begins with being raised with God, having a foretaste of glory divine. Do you have this foretaste? Have you been raised with Christ? Have you been raised by the hand of God? Have you been raised from death? Have you been raised with Christ? Have you been raised to life? It is only God that can raise you with Christ. It says the power of God that raised Christ from the dead. May you experience this power. And may God set you up to seek the things that are above. Hope to see you during the next session. God richly bless you.